Hello, WRN Marketing Automation Pilot Program. In this video, we're going to cover part 2 of forms, looking at the custom field manager. We're going to cover part 2 of marketing automation, looking at lists. And we're going to do an intro to personas. What's a persona? Well, you just have to wait and find out. But let's dive right in. Let's go over to the silhouette and select settings. Then scroll down to features. And right there it says custom fields. Click on that. So what's the purpose of custom fields? When you're creating a form, you want to be able to gather any type of information that you need. And once you create these fields, they'll be accessible in many areas of the platform. So let's see how to create a field. Go over to this button and click Add Field. Now there's lead fields, account fields, and opportunity fields. Lead fields are to attract new leads. Account fields are for getting information from accounts you already have. And opportunity fields are for reaching out to people who are already in your sales funnel. 90% of the time you will be doing lead fields. So let's click on that and then name it. I'll call this the big question. Now we want to click all of these because we want it available everywhere. And now here are all the field types. I'll go through this briefly. Text input, that's pretty obvious. If the field label up here was something like your favorite TV show. In the form, this is where people would type their answer. Now, if you wanted to have a multiple choice, Friends, Star Trek, Leave It to Beaver, you'd use a drop down or a radio group. We'll talk about that in a second. Where it says placeholder, you'd type in anything that you want already in the field. It can be as simple as write your answer here. Text area is very similar. With text input, you can have a maximum of 250 characters. With text area, you can have a maximum of 2,500. So it just opens up the amount of information that you put in. So if this question was talk about your work history, you definitely want to use text area over text input. Hidden, that's for something more complicated in programming and the forms talking to each other. Don't worry about that now. Drop down select. This is for something like music. And then the label might be country. And then you need to go over here and add a new choice. Add a new choice. Now you can use this little arrow to move these up or down. You can certainly delete it. And over here it says select by default. So if you're assuming that most people that you send this form to that has this field like country, you can select that by default. Same thing with rock or polka. And if you don't want anything selected by default, you can just click that and nothing will be selected. That's probably your best option. If you have something selected by default, there's a chance that somebody might not make their own selection and just leave it at the default. And then you just click Create Field. And here we go. You are immediately taken to a list of all the custom fields you've created. So let's go back and create another field so we can see the other options. Country is obvious, state is obvious. Boolean is a yes or no question. Again, that's more in programming. A checkbox group, that's similar to dropdown, but instead of your choices being on a dropdown, with a checkbox, they can select more than one. So if you were doing a question that was something like check all the foods that you like, and you had 10 different foods, people could tick all those boxes that they like. Radio group is similar to a checkbox group, but instead of being able to check multiple boxes, they can only check one. So with that, it might be, what is your most favorite food? Phone number is obvious. Date picker. This gives you the option of the format. So with this, it's month, day, year. With this, it's day, month, year. This is written out. You get the picture. Date, time picker, same thing. URL, you would use this not for somebody's homepage of their website because that's already a standard field with SharpSpring. For this, it would be like if you're an interior designer and in the form you wanted to say, paste the URL of a couch or a table that you found online that you like. Bit, you don't have to worry about. That's more programming stuff. We'll talk about that in subsequent tutorials. File upload, this gives a button where the user would click to upload a file from their computer. And attachment URL. If there was a specific file attached to a URL, that's a little more specific than that URL. And then you just click Create Field. Once created, it goes into this list. And there's additional functionality over here. You just click on this. With this, you can edit the field. So let's say I don't want this to be Boolean. I want this to be text input. So I just want someone to type in the type of tree they'd want to be, and then I update the field. I can duplicate it. Let's say I've made a drop down of 10 different foods that people like, and they can select one. And I also decide that I want another form that has the 10 foods as a checkbox where they can select more than one. I don't want to have to go through the effort of typing in those 10 foods again. I can just duplicate this and turn it into a checkbox form rather than a drop down. Delete field, that's obvious. Move to category. So right now, as you can see, it's in uncategorized. But let's say that I wanted to make a folder just for WRN fields. There we go. And then I could move any of these that I want into WRN. I can also take them back out again. That right into uncategorized. And then here I could rename this or just delete it. Copy field ID to clipboard. That is if you're doing something a little more technically advanced. We'll leave that for now. So those are the custom fields. They're going to show up in the next thing that we talk about. And that is automation. And we're going to cover lists today. Now a list is a segment of all of your contacts. In other words, over here at the contact manager, these are all the contacts you have either uploaded or that have gotten in the system through form fills or other ways. In lists, what we want to do is we want to segment those contacts. For instance, if I have a contact list of 4,000 people, and I just want to reach out to people who are college aged, I want to build a list of college age people. It's important that every email that you send out pertains to the receiver of the email. If I'm trying to reach out to people to sell them on marketing automation, I want to do startups, lawyers, doctors, chiropractors who have been in business for more than 25 years, chiropractors who are just starting their business. The more I segment my audience, the more specific I can be in reaching them. Now, there are two kinds of lists. There are static lists and dynamic lists. A static list is similar to this, the WRN list that we uploaded. This is a list that is not set up to automatically receive more contacts. A dynamic list, on the other hand, is set up so people self-select into that list. Somebody fills out a form, someone opens up a specific email, or visits a specific page of the website. We set up automation to move them into certain lists. Now, the reason I may have a static list is if I'm doing an event for just my top tier clients, I only want to put that information out to them, and I don't want anybody new added to that list. But most of the time, we're going to be building dynamic lists, and let's talk about that. With a dynamic list or a rules-based list, it's going to update automatically anytime someone meets a specific criteria. And we're going to use some of the same automation tools that we used in tasks and workflows. Let's take a look. To begin, you go over to the options button and you click New List. Give it a name. I'll call this. And then you might want to put a description of what it's about. Hopefully you'll end up with lots of lists and you want to keep them all straight. Now we haven't created any folders yet, so we'll leave that alone, and we want this available in the contact manager. As I said, this is a rules-based list, so we'll leave that like that, and then we'll click Create List. Now it takes us directly to a page where we can change the name, we can change the description, and it looks a lot like it did when we were dealing with tasks and workflows. And by the way, up here it says dynamic or static. We're certainly going to leave it as dynamic. Where it says apply to the contacts already in your database. If I'm building a list of people that I want to come to my event, I definitely want to draw on people already in my database, not just people who are going to pages, opening emails, or entering information into a form. So here's where you set the rules that your contacts meet to be put on the list. So when building the list, the big event, I might say, when a contact fills out the form, and I just pick one of the forms I've created, add anytime, they get put on the list. But that's going to draw in a lot of people. So I want to add another rule. When a contact has the field, and this is where
I can use one of the fields I just created. Like, if I were a tree, the kind of tree I'd be is. And I really want people who want to be pine trees. And I add that rule. Now, right now, it's saying that it'll put someone on the list if they fill out a form, or if they fill out a field that says the kind of tree they'd like to be is pine. But that's not narrowing down the people I want on my list. So I'm going to change this from when any to when all. So they have to both fill out the form and answer that they'd like to be a pine tree. Now I can add other things as well to further narrow this down. So I want them to also visit the important page, sales. And they can visit it one time or more. I'm going to add that rule. Now they have to fill out the form, they have to say they want to be a pine tree, and they have to visit my sales page. So I'm building a very particular list of people who I want to reach out to for my big event. Now I might want to add a filter here. And what that means is I'm going to go to add the filter. And has the field. And let's say that I don't want guys named Bob. And I'm going to select not equal and then add that. And so what that means is that when someone fills out the form, they say that they want to be a pine tree, they visit my sales page, and when they're not named Bob, they get on the list. I got one rule: no Bobs in my seminars. Now, once that's done, I click Save Changes, and I'm taken to the page of the big event, and it shows that I have no members. So all that means is that there is no one currently in my list that fits that criteria, and nobody has, as of yet, taken those actions to get on the list. Now let's do this a little differently. So I'm going to go to Options, and I'm going to change list settings. That'll take me right back to the page where I just was with triggers and filters. And let's say, I've made a colossal mistake. I don't want any of these. So I can just delete them. And I'm right back to creating this list. So let's say this time I want it to be someone fills out the form at any time. And then this time I'm going to add the filter.
When a contact has a field, and I'm going to select a field.
Now this is a custom field that I made earlier. That was a drop down where someone could select from what they want: cakes, candy, or ice cream. So I'm going to add that filter. So in this way, when someone fills out this form and they also select that they want cakes, then they get added to the list. Save changes. Then again, I go back here and nobody's on the list. So let's say that we want to build a list from contacts already in the system. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back and edit this list. I could create a new one, but I'll just edit this. I'm going to remove these settings. And this time I'm going to go when a contact has the field first name of Earl. And I know it says when it changes to Earl, but it's the same thing as just putting in the name Earl and say exactly. And I'm also going to add a filter when a contact has not opened the email, and I'm going to select one of my emails and then add that rule. And then I'm going to save changes. Now we do have someone in my contacts who fits that. Earl Trusty in my business group fits that criteria. His name is Earl, and he did not open that email. So it automatically created that list. Now anybody else named Earl who fills out a form and does not open that email will get added to this list. The great thing about this is that lists will continue to grow on their own as people fulfill the criteria that you create.
In building a list, use a criteria that will generate a unique group of contacts, so the emails you send them will always pertain to them specifically.
I want to show you some other list functions. So let's go to Automation and Lists, which takes us to the lists of lists. These are all the lists I have created. And over here, when you click that, you have a lot of different options. You can change the list settings, which is what I did just a little while ago. Brought us right there. You can rename the list. Now this is great. You can schedule a workflow for the list. So in our previous tutorial, showed you how to create a workflow. So you can add this workflow to this list. Well, what's that mean? I may have a workflow that begins with sending out an email, following people to a landing page, notifying me, sending them a thank you. Now, I might want to initiate that workflow to a specific list. In other words, let's say I pulled together a list of people who I want to attend a workshop. I think that based on the criteria, these are the best people for this workshop. I'm going to have a workflow that's going to guide people along a funnel to get them into that workshop. And I want to execute that workflow on this particular list of those people.
So right here, you choose the workflow that you want to use. I wouldn't click the box, include remove list members. These are people who have already opted out. Why bother them if they don't want to be receiving your emails? Then you set the time that you want to send it. If you think you want to send it right away, leave as soon as possible click. If not, click in here and set the date and time. Then click Schedule Workflow.
You can also view the members of the list. So if we do that, we'll go back and see old Earl Trusty there. And send an email to the list. So that's different than a workflow because it's just one specific email. So these are all the emails I have created. Maybe I want to send a teaser email out to a list of people who I want to attend a workshop, saying that the workshop's coming up and there will be more information later. But it's just a way to send a one-up email to a certain list. We can create a sample list from this list. Since there's only one person though, let me do that here on the WRN. So let's say I just want to pull a few names out of a list just to see what kind of people are in the list that this system is automatically creating. I can create a sample list and do that. And I can also make it as big or small as I want. I can create a sample list of 1 or of 70. Rebuild the list. If I think that new people have been added to the system and somehow they haven't ended up in the list, I can use that and it will go back through the system and see if there's any more people that fit that criteria, though it should do that all automatically. And then finally, I can just remove the list. So that's automation and lists. We're now going to talk about automation and personas. What's a persona? A persona is a tool for classifying people based on their interests, their type, and other various non-tangible qualities. Things like what they like and how they see themselves. Personas aren't demographic type information like college student or factory worker. Personas are more about qualities like activist, adventurer, risk taker. These are qualities that anybody in any strata of income level, age, or profession could have. So then what are personas for? Well, they help you and your team organize your thinking about these people and how you can best approach them based on their deeper wants and emotional needs. It's sort of a whiteboard on which you've sketched out the type of people you're trying to reach. This is important because if you're trying to reach an activist, that could be a college student or a factory worker. Their age and socioeconomic background matters less, and their desire for social change matters more. So like everything else we do here, your contacts get classified into a persona based on the actions that they take, such as opening a particular email, visiting a landing page, a website, or making a selection from a drop-down. When you set up a persona, you answered the question, I would classify myself as. So how does that work? Let's say that you had 3 personas. One was an activist. And the answer to the question I would classify myself as is someone who fights for justice and social change. Another persona might be like a California surfer dude. And so the classify myself as answer would be someone who's chill, likes to hang out on the beach and surf. And a third might be a very conservative business person. So the answer would be someone who focuses on growing wealth and doing well in business. 3 different personas, 3 different answers to that question. Now those questions show up on a form. So if someone sees those 3 answers, the one that they select is going to put them into that persona.
So I just wanted to give you this overview of what personas are. In our next tutorial, we're going to go through how to set them up and how to use them as triggers. Till then.